Today, the story of the robbery I'm going to tell you about is quite unique because in this case, the thieves didn't just rob a bank, but the money they stole wasn't ordinary public money. This time, the money belonged to none other than the 37th President of the United States, Richard Nixon. This entire heist was executed with brilliant planning, and people close to the president were involved in it. The total amount looted was nearly $12 million, which today would be worth around 100 Indian rupees crores. This robbery is considered one of the most brilliant heists ever, and around 125 police officers were assigned to investigate the case, making it the largest investigation after the JFK murder probe. The gang involved in this theft gave the FBI sleepless nights, and when the truth finally came out, it left everyone stunned, because the names that emerged during the investigation were completely unexpected. So, how is this brilliant and cunning robbery executed? Who were the people involved in this operation? And what kind of trap did the FBI set to finally catch these thieves? All of this is incredibly surprising and thrilling in itself. This is the story of a man named Emil Dincio, who carried out one of the biggest robberies of that era at the United California Bank, and drove the FBI into a whirlwind trying to solve the case. Emil Dincio was born in a poor family in Ohio, and that was the main reason why he always wanted to escape poverty. In his quest to rise above his poor life, Emil started doing anything that could make him decent money, whether right or wrong didn't matter to him. Anyway, he started stealing at a very young age and gradually began robbing banks. By the time the 1970s arrived, he had become infamous in the underworld as a cunning bank robber. He carried out these bank robberies with such cleverness and precision that no one got injured or killed, and he would silently flee the scene with the loot. By now, Emil was 36 years old, and in the year 1972, he received a tip from one of his underworld contacts about the United California Bank. The person who gave him this tip was Jimmy Hoffa, who was at that time a dangerous and well-known name in the American underworld. Jimmy was the head of a vast criminal organization that worked through various gangs. If any disputes occurred between these gangs, Jimmy would mediate and settle them. You could say he was like a godfather. Jimmy passed on this tip to Emil through one of his gang members. The tip said that in the Laguna Niguel branch of the United California Bank, there was a safe deposit box containing $30 million. The moment Emil received this information, he realized that if he could pull off this heist, he would never need to steal again. So, he began planning the robbery. However, even though Emil had started planning, one question kept bothering him. How could a small bank like United California Bank, which usually didn't even carry $500,000 in cash, have $30 million? The answer to this question lay just 25 kilometers away in San Clemente. That was the location of President Richard Nixon's personal home, known as the Western White House. Yes, the $30 million stored at the United California Bank in Laguna Niguel actually belonged to President Richard Nixon himself. Since he was running for re-election, he needed a lot of money for his campaign. All of this money was black money, donated to Nixon by various individuals who wanted to help him win the election. To hide this illegal money, Nixon had stored it in different secret locations, one of which was the United California Bank. And now comes the most shocking part of the story. Jimmy Hoffa, the same gangster who leaked the information about the president's secret funds to Emil, had himself donated millions of dollars to Nixon's campaign. Because Jimmy was a major figure in the criminal underworld, he was imprisoned for his illegal activities before the election. He approached President Nixon and requested a pardon in exchange for more campaign donations and support. At the time, President Nixon was trying hard to clean up his public image. So, he rejected Jimmy's offer and upheld his prison sentence. This created a rift between Jimmy and President Nixon. Jimmy was furious and decided to take revenge at any cost. He wanted his $1 million back, which he had given for the presidential election campaign. And he knew very well that this money, along with the rest of the funds, was kept inside the vault of the United California Bank. Now Jimmy began to think day and night about how he could get that money out of the bank. Then he thought of Emil, one of the greatest bank robbers of his time. He informed Emil about the United California Bank and the money kept inside. This was going to be the biggest heist of Emil's life, and he began preparations and planning immediately. First, he started building a team of people he could trust, people who could help him carry out this robbery. That's why he began including his own family members in the gang. The first person he included was his brother, James Ginzo. Then he brought in his nephew, Harry Barber, and his brother-in-law, Chuck Mallinger. Now a four-man team had been formed. But Emil knew very well that for such a big heist, he would need the help of another friend, Phil Christopher. But Phil lived in Cleveland, and he brought along another friend named Charlie Brocken. Charlie had also successfully executed some major heists in the past. Now, they had a strong six-member team made up of seasoned criminals. After the team was ready, Emil told all the gang members about the robbery and which bank they were going to hit. But there was one thing he hid from everyone, that the money they were going to steal actually belonged to American President Richard Nixon. Only 3 people knew the real amount involved in the heist: Emil, his brother James, and his brother-in-law Chuck. These 3 were also going to take the biggest share of the loot, because out of the stolen money, $8 million was to go to Jimmy Hoffa, who had donated it for the presidential campaign. Another $8 million was to be divided among the other 3 members. The remaining $4 million was to be split between Emil, his brother, and his brother-in-law, meaning each would get $8 million. Every member of the gang was a professional criminal with years of experience, and they all knew exactly what they had to do during the robbery. The gang moved ahead with their preparations, gathering everything they would need, from torches to wire bombs. Since Emil was from Ohio, and the heist had to be carried out in Laguna Niguel, California, their biggest challenge was transporting all the robbery tools to California. Emil solved that problem too. He sent all the equipment to California through his girlfriend. Then he and his gang caught a flight to California. Once in California, the most important task was to find a place where they could plan the robbery without attracting police attention. Eventually, they rented a house about 1 kilometer from the United California Bank. The special thing about this house was that the bank's roof was clearly visible from there. They now had the perfect place to operate from, which they started calling their headquarters. They continued with their preparations. First, they needed a car to escape in after the robbery, so they bought a 1962 Oldsmobile. The biggest reason for choosing this car was its large trunk. Emil believed that all the robbery tools could be carried in the trunk, and after the robbery, the stolen cash could also be loaded into it. Since it was a second-hand car, Emil had it registered under a fake name. So even if someone traced the car, it wouldn't lead back to them. By now, they had spent several $1,000s on planning the heist, but everyone knew that if the robbery succeeded, their lives would change forever. They split into different teams and started observing every movement around the bank closely. They monitored the bank's opening and closing times, customer traffic, and how crowded the area was during the day. During this time, one detail caught their attention. In all those days of surveillance, not a single police car had passed by the bank. This clearly meant that escaping after the heist would be quite easy. Another piece of good news for Emil and his gang was that there was no security guard outside the bank. The only security feature was an alarm bell placed outside. But that didn't bother Emil either. He had figured out how to disable it. Since the bank was part of strip mall, Emil and his gang had to be extra careful while getting in and out of the bank unnoticed. The hardest part of this heist was that the bank was surrounded by the mall building, and they had to pass through that structure to reach the bank. Emil knew very well that after disabling the alarm, they would have to drill holes in the bank's roof using a drilling machine. Then they would plant bombs and blow it open. All of this had to be done without being seen or attracting any attention. It was through this roof that they had to reach the vault that contained the safe deposit boxes. After months of planning, Emil was finally about to carry out the biggest heist of his life. And his only target was the enormous wealth of President Richard Nixon. The money was deposited in the United California Bank. Emil was paying very close attention to every detail while planning the heist, which is why he bought some scanners that he was going to install outside the bank, so they would know if the police arrived. 2 members of Emil's gang had stolen some ladders from outside a church, so they could use those ladders to climb onto the bank's roof. Finally, the day arrived when they were to carry out the heist. Emil divided all 6 members into teams for 3 days. According to the plan, James and Emil were the first to climb to the bank's roof using those ladders, and Christopher stood near the ladder holding a shotgun so he could alert them if anyone approached. Meanwhile, the other 3 members of the gang started filling bags with soil so that when they blasted open the vault's ceiling, the soil-filled bags would suppress the sound of the explosion. Anyway, when Emil and James reached the bank's roof with all their tools, Emil first started disabling the bank alarms. Since the alarms were located just under the roof, Emil sprayed them with liquid styrofoam. When the spray hardened completely, the bell of the alarm was jammed too, which meant the alarm would no longer work. As per the plan, both of them started making a hole in the part of the roof that was directly above the vault. Meanwhile, the other gang members brought the soil-filled bags up to the roof. After making a hole in the roof, Emil and James were the first to go down onto the vault's ceiling and disable all the interior alarms. Now the last job that remained was to get inside the vault and steal $30 million. Emil knew very well that getting inside the vault wouldn't be easy, so he and his team began drilling small holes into the vault ceiling. They drilled a total of 6 holes and placed dynamite bombs in each one so they could blow up the vault ceiling. To suppress the sound of the bombs, they placed the soil-filled bags on top of the dynamite. Since all these dynamites were filled with nitroglycerin, there was a risk. They had no guarantee the dynamites would even explode. But luck was on Emil and his gang's side, and all the dynamites went off. The benefit of the soil-filled bags was that the sound of the blast was completely muffled, and no one nearby had any idea about the explosion. After the blast, when they removed the bags, a sparkle came into their eyes, because in front of them were iron rods, and beyond those rods, the safe deposit boxes were clearly visible. Now, using their 7 acetylene torches, they started cutting through the iron rods and entered the vault one by one, where around 500 safe deposit boxes were in front of them. They had brought pointed hammers with them, and now they began hitting the locks of the safe deposit boxes with those hammers. One by one, the boxes started opening. Since Richard already knew which safety deposit boxes contained President Richard's money, he opened only those boxes so he could quickly finish the heist and get out. As soon as Emil opened the first deposit box, he saw that it was completely filled with $100 bills, but it had only $2 million in it. He told his team to start opening the deposit boxes with the designated numbers one by one. And as soon as endless wealth started pouring out of those boxes, the sparkle in their eyes grew brighter. Slowly, the sun started to rise, and hundreds of safety deposit boxes still remained unopened. But since the bank was closed for 2 days, Emil and his gang decided to return the next night. They decided they would come back the following night, Saturday night, and open the remaining deposit boxes to take all the money. In the meantime, Emil covered the hole on the roof with a wooden board so no one would notice, and they all left the bank. On Saturday afternoon, they all watched the bank's roof from a distance using binoculars to make sure no one had discovered the heist. By now, Emil understood that if they wanted to open all the safety deposit boxes, he would need to include more people in the gang. That's why he recruited 2 more people for the heist. Now, there were 8 people in the gang. All of them returned on Saturday night and began their robbery again inside the vault. Until now, everything was going perfectly. They were looting the safety boxes easily. But then something happened that none of them had expected. Emil's brother-in-law, Chuck Mallon, who was standing outside the bank to keep watch, informed the gang members through walkie-talkie that a car had stopped near their vehicle. The car belonged to cleaning staff responsible for cleaning the mall and the outer area of the bank. Fortunately for Emil and his gang, the cleaning staff had no idea that a robbery was happening inside the bank. While the cleaning staff kept cleaning, the robbers stopped their activity inside the vault and quietly stayed still without making a sound so that no noise would go outside. Now, it was Monday morning at 4 a.m., and the entire gang had opened 450 deposit boxes and were preparing to exit the vault. Before leaving the vault, Emil struck the vault door with a hammer with great force, damaging the vault's time clock. Then he locked the vault door, which clearly meant that even the bank employees would not be able to open the vault. The next morning, the bank opened at its usual time, and the employees got busy with their work. During this, the bank manager asked the housekeeping guy to go clean the roof. And as soon as the housekeeping staffer reached the roof, he couldn't believe his eyes when he saw the scene. He immediately ran to call the bank manager. When the manager came to the terrace, he saw a hole in the terrace and vault roof, and all the safety deposit boxes were open. He immediately called the police. The police arrived and started questioning the bank employees. One question kept bothering the police. Why did the thieves target a small bank like the United California Bank? And why was the robbery carried out with such perfection? Anyway, during the investigation, when police realized they had never seen a heist like this before, they informed the FBI. The case was assigned to Special Agent Paul Chamber, and also Special Agent Francis from Santa Ana, California was put on the case. This was a time when Los Angeles was called the bank robbery capital of the world, where thieves pulled off massive heists in various banks, creating a huge headache for the California police and the FBI. Most of these robberies used to happen in broad daylight, when bank employees were at work. But this case, which agents Paul and Francis were investigating, was completely different from other bank robberies. This time, the robbery was executed in the dark of night. And when they saw the inside of the vault, the FBI officers were shocked. Agent Paul saw that bags filled with soil were scattered all over the floor, and it took the FBI a whole day to carefully inspect everything in the vault. What shocked both FBI agents the most was that the thief had looted 450 safety deposit boxes without anyone noticing. And that's why the FBI couldn't even figure out what exactly was stolen from those boxes. Meanwhile, the forensic team arrived on the scene and started collecting all the evidence, while Agent Frank went outside the bank in search of more clues. During this, his eyes fell on a ladder leading to the bank's roof. He also noticed the bell alarm, which had been jammed with liquid styrofoam. The way the thieves had jammed that bell alarm and carried out the robbery was completely unique for that era. The FBI agents were having a lot of trouble understanding this robbery because they had never investigated a theft like this before. The first angle that came up in front of both FBI officers was that all the robbers had left Los Angeles, California. And this guess turned out to be absolutely correct. This case was becoming more and more complicated by the day, and the American government had now started to realize that this case was not going to be solved so easily. Because of this, the FBI assigned 125 agents to the case. The number of agents was so large that this became the biggest case in FBI history to involve so many officers in one investigation. And when the news of such a large-scale investigation reached Emil and his gang, they began the next phase of their plan. Now Emil and his gang started erasing every piece of evidence from the place where they had planned and operated the heist, so that the police and the FBI could not reach them. They began cleaning everything very carefully, from the doors and windows to the ceiling and floor of the house, so that no fingerprints or DNA could be found by the FBI. And then they all left the house and disappeared. Although they had cleaned every corner of the house, during this time, they made a mistake that changed the entire course of this story. More than 36 hours had passed since the robbery, and Emil and his gang had already left California. But when they began counting the stolen money, it turned out to be not $30 million, but only $12.8 million. Emil was quite shocked to see this because, according to the information they had, this amount was much less than what they had expected to steal. Nevertheless, now it was time to turn all this stolen money white. For this, they headed to Las Vegas, where they were going to use Jimmy Hoffa's underworld connections to launder the money. The decade from 1960 to 1970 was the time when most of America's big criminals used to launder their black money in Las Vegas. That's why Las Vegas had become a hub for money laundering at the time. The method to convert this black money into white was also quite interesting. First, the black money was converted into casino chips. Then a deal was made between the criminals and the casino owners. According to the deal, the criminals would gamble a portion of the money and give it to the casino as a cut. The rest of the black money would be converted back into cash by the casino owners and handed over to the criminals as clean money. Emil also made a similar deal with a casino owner, in which he was going to give $500,000 to the casino owner as a cut. In return, the casino owner was going to launder all the stolen bank money for Emil. Eventually, Emil converted all the black money into white very smoothly and carefully. Meanwhile, the FBI had no clue or evidence that could lead them to the robbers. Now, the pressure on the FBI to solve the case was increasing because 125 agents were already involved in this case. The only other time so many agents had been involved in an investigation was when American President John F. Kennedy was shot. Now agents Paul and Francis talked separately to each agent involved in the case and told them to activate their informants. If any lead related to the case surfaced, they were to contact Paul and Francis immediately. More than 2 months had passed since the robbery, and still, the FBI had no lead. But then one afternoon, the phone rang at the Los Angeles FBI office. The call came from the Cleveland police station, informing them that a bank robbery had occurred in Ohio. The method used in this robbery was exactly the same as the one used in the United California bank robbery. This time, the Cleveland police station gave the Los Angeles FBI a list of about 100 suspects who could be involved in the robbery, along with details about which suspect was an expert in which kind of crime. As soon as they received this list, the Los Angeles FBI felt a ray of hope. They began their investigation using this list. Agents Paul and Francis started filtering out the people who had flown to and from California during the United California bank robbery. And that's when their arrow hit the mark. They achieved their first breakthrough in the case. During the investigation, the first name that came up was Emil Dincio. The Cleveland police had been looking for Emil for years in connection with bank robberies, but they could never catch him. A few more names from his suspect list also came up. These were the same people who were with Emil on the night of the bank robbery. Now the layers of this case started unraveling one by one. Emil and his gang were so confident during the robbery that they thought they would never be caught. That's why they booked flight tickets using their real names. And this turned out to be their biggest mistake. Now the FBI had to find out where all the robbers went after robbing the United California Bank. For this, they started questioning taxi drivers around the airport. During several days of questioning, one taxi driver recognized Chuck Mulligan from a photo and told the FBI that a few weeks ago, Emil and his gang had threatened him, but also gave him a $100 tip because he dropped them off outside a luxury hotel named Jubilee Inn. Once they found out the name of the hotel, the FBI agents immediately reached there and discovered that Emil's brother-in-law Chuck Mulligan had booked a room under his real name. The agents then checked the call records of the hotel room and found that Chuck had called a man named Al Dawson, who lived in Trenton, California. Upon investigating Dawson, it was revealed that he was currently living in Youngstown, Ohio. When the FBI questioned Dawson, he said that Chuck Mulligan was a good friend of his and had come to park a car in his garage, which was still there. When the FBI asked Dawson about the bank robbery, he said he knew nothing about it. The FBI then took a search warrant and went to search the car in Dawson's garage. Agents Paul and Francis began searching the car, and the items they found inside made their eyes light up. They understood that they were now very close to solving the case. From the car, they found gloves, face masks, weapons, hammers, and every item that was used in the robbery. They even found fingerprints belonging to Emil. Now the FBI had to find out where Emil and his gang had planned the robbery and where they had been hiding. Once again, Chuck's call records helped them. From the records, the FBI learned that Chuck had called a real estate agent in Laguna Niguel, California, and had booked a large flat under the name Harry Barber. The flat had been booked for 3 months, which clearly meant that even if they vacated it in a few days, no one would come to stay there for the next few months. When the FBI reached the flat, they found it completely clean and shining. No fingerprints or DNA evidence had been left behind. But just then, the agents noticed one plate in the kitchen that had not been washed. And this was the mistake that was about to bring down Emil and his gang. Using that dish, the FBI started developing latent fingerprints. When those prints were matched, they turned out to belong to Emil and some members of his gang. This meant that the FBI could now arrest all the robbers. Finally, on the morning of June 27th, 1972, when Emil Dincio stepped out of his house and got in his car, about a dozen police cars surrounded him and arrested him. During the search of Emil's house, the police found several $1,000s hidden in different places. Emil also revealed where the rest of his gang members were hiding. The FBI had now arrested the entire gang. All they needed was one person who could testify against the gang and cooperate with the police. At this time, one gang member, Charlie Brocker, agreed to cooperate with the police. He told them everything about the bank robbery plan and the hidden money. Emil's brother James was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Emil, Chuck, and Barbara were each sentenced to 20 years. Since Charlie Brocker cooperated with the police, he was released without any sentence. The police were able to recover only $8 million out of the $12 million. This was the story of a perfect robbery that would never have been caught, but a single dirty plate led to the arrest of the entire gang. It became the biggest investigation in FBI history.